The blackboard stands upright in the class, catching patches of morning sun. My chalk taps and scratches across it, like someone with a broken heel rushing to catch a bus. "Sir," says one of the students, "you've got chalk dust on your face. There are sniggers. Any excuse for a distraction. Any excuse to get off the subject of Earth, upon which they exist." I'm the only teacher I know that still uses a blackboard. Schools haven't used blackboards for 20 years or more, so I have to bring my own. For me, in this fast-moving digital age, it represents a stable form of knowledge. Also, as a geography teacher, I prefer writing in chalk, because chalk forms the very bedrock of this country, or at least large parts of southern and eastern England, including London, beneath this very school. Chalk is tactile. It's noisy, messy. I normally leave class layered in chalk dust, so I'm known amongst the pupils and teachers alike as the giant chalk man of Cerne Abyss, despite being 5 feet 4.96 inches. Also, sir, will we actually be covering catastrophic climate-induced human extinction in our exams? Shouldn't we be focused on groins? The only geography subject the class feels strongly about is the curriculum itself, which is firmly embedded in stone. My role dictates that I must present the commandments, like Moses, rather than actually wording the tablets myself. The students are already more clued up on the disasters facing our planet than most adults, but their exams, unfortunately, are far more urgent. Sir, I realise I'm staring absently at a square of sunlight at the top of the blackboard, which resembles an upstairs window. 30 teenagers stare at me, awaiting answers. Sir! With the sleeve of my jumper, I wipe the blackboard clean of today's lesson and drop the chalk into my pocket. Collecting my coat and blackboard, I excuse myself. "Class, I'm just popping out. Back shortly." My blackboard is tall and heavy with a wooden frame. Normally it's stored behind a table in the staff room, but today I cart it down the hall, out the end door, and towards the gate. Buzzing myself out, I lug it with me towards the bus stop. The bus I catch heads towards the centre of London, and after gently whomping an old boy, I lean my blackboard up in the pram and wheelchair area. The bell rings 4 times for the same stop, so retrieving my chalk, I write on the board. "Wearing earphones? Check to see if someone's already rung the bell, you flid." A young student who should be in school points to the board and says, "No one says flid anymore." "That's disappointing," I say. "It's such a great word." "What about tool? Do you still call someone a tool?" "Not so much." "Oh, I'm all for the expansion of the language, but there are some words that would be a real shame to lose." The student shrugs their blazer and gets off. I get off at a tube station. The station attendant hesitates before letting me through the gate. My blackboard takes up the space of 4 and a bit seats on the train. It still features the flid comment, so I wipe this off and write, "We are currently travelling through a tunnel of Cretaceous chalk, covered by a blanket of Cenozoic sediments, including London clay." A woman opposite closes her eyes, pretending to be asleep. As a response to my lesson, it's fairly typical. I get off at Blackfriars, ignoring the vibrations from my phone. The station attendant here is a bit more iffy about the size of my blackboard, but I show them my school lanyard and point out how very thin and compact the board is when viewed from a side-on perspective. I wait on the platform, which is built across the Thames. The tide is out on the banks, revealing sand, silt and stones. It's a nice change of scene from work, but it's still small fry in broader geographical terms. I want to see more water on Earth than you can throw a stick at. Fortunately, I have a train ticket for Brighton, by the sea. My carriage seat is one of 4 set around a table as if for dinner. I don't know any of my fellow diners, so it's a bit like that show Come Dine With Me, except we're belting through the countryside and we don't talk and eat little. A young man opposite me manages to demolish a pack of crisps like the Cookie Monster, his eyeballs spinning around. His female friend has her fingers spread on a tissue, and is painting her nails a shade of cobalt blue. The young man gives his trousers a loud walloping to rid them of the crisp crumbs. Outside, the sun shines upon the third rock from the sun. I'm off on an adventure, blasting forth across our terrestrial surface, but I'm facing backwards. There are racks above the seats, and I did consider lying my blackboard on these, creating a sort of den across the aisle for those of us sitting beneath. Instead, it's leaning on the flip-up seats near the door, facing outwards, with the chalked message, "How's my driving? Call 0800 555 555. Have you ever noticed all the crushed stones next to the railway tracks? I ask my table friends. There are pained expressions all round. It's called track ballast, and it helps keep the sleepers in place. It also deters vegetation from growing and is useful for drainage. These are simple, unchallenging facts, but I may as well have asked who wants a dance. The man beside me could be a murderer, but he stands up to let me pass as I head off in search of beer. On the buffet counter is a small blackboard, listing the cakes of the day, including rock cakes. Honestly, just because you add dried fruit or oatmeal to your dough doesn't mean you're forming rocks. While the server makes someone a tea, I wipe their blackboard clean and write "rock cakes my arsehole." I don't order cakes or food, settling instead for 3 expensive train beers. Back at the dining table, the young couple opposite are talking to each other. What time should we head to Chalk? Ooh, about 7:30ish? 8? My ears prick up at this and I politely interject. Excuse me, I couldn't help overhearing. Did you say you were going to Chalk? Yeah. What is this Chalk you speak of? It's a venue, with bands. A music venue called Chalk, in Brighton. Yeah, well, fancy that. I know a lot about Chalk as it happens. Look, I've even got some on me. Wow. A lot of the south coast here is built on chalk. Parts of it are a mile thick. It was actually formed around 80 to 100 million years ago when the Earth was warming and great swathes of land disappeared beneath the sea. In the sea were billions of microscopic organisms, and their dead skeletons became this white, sedimentary rock, which... Okay, thanks. Sure, fine, right you are. I'll just drink these beers here. Yum yum. Our train stops off at Gatwick Airport. As well as car parks filled with gazillions of cars, the approaching aeroplanes, which are part of a visible queue in the sky, have their lights switched on. What the heck? I exclaim. It's the middle of the day and the airplanes have their lights switched on. On top of everything else. The young couple give each other cross-eyed looks. So I drink my beer and, once the train is underway again, I gaze upon the crust of the earth. To keep things positive, I imagine the driver of our train is wearing a poo emoji costume with a big laughing smile. It's early afternoon when our train pulls into Brighton. Exiting the station, I'm reminded of a line from Graham Greene's novel Brighton Rock, where he describes glimpsing the distant sea down Queen's Road. It stretches, he writes, like a piece of common washing, hung across the end of the street. That vivid image holds true today. I wish I had that talent, to describe straight facts in an interesting way. Perhaps more people would hear me out. I also wish people still use the sun and wind to dry their washing, but that's a different kettle of fish. Rather than taking the straight road to the sea, I decide to meander by way of the lanes. By walking in small bursts, I can look more casual while lugging a massive blackboard around. Although not old-school slate, its porcelain enamel surface does have a steel base, and I don't have a giant's arms, and have just been downing beers. The Brighton Information Centre is a good chance for a rest. Inside is like the internet, in real time. A wealth of local knowledge abounds, and rather than scrolling, you just look with your eyes. Brochures invite you on White Cliff walks and South Downs tours, although they feel a bit too school trip to me. The Chalk venue is here, opposite the Pier, says the kindly woman at the desk, circling a map with a pen. It's part of the coach station. Really? I remark. That must be very useful for the bands after their gigs, because their tour buses could drive on stage and they could just, jump right on. I'm not sure. They should turn it into a drive-in venue, so the band plays on stage and you watch from your bus. But if you were sitting at the back of the bus, it's a good incentive not to sit at the back of the bus, you see? With the naughty kids. Sit in the front. See the band. Laden with information, I collect my blackboard and press on. But I stop abruptly soon after when I see a shop selling rocks. They're not your standard beach pebbles or muddy garden stones. Many of the specimens on display have been buffed and polished to look pretty. Some are purely minerals and some are housed in glass cabinets as part of expensive jewellery. The woman behind the counter looks worried when I carry in my large, unwieldy companion. "Ooh, not sure if we allow blackboards in here," she says. "It's quite safe," I assure her. "Safe enough for classrooms with small children for well over a century." After carefully leaning my board against a cabinet edge, the woman says, "OK, let me know if you need any help." "Thanks," I reply. "I'm quite well versed in rocks already. Proper rocks, at least." Although used to viewing stones and rocks with labels, it feels strange to see them with price tags. The most expensive examples come as forms of adornment in earrings, necklaces and rings, while other more interesting pieces are valued to go. A set of 5 orthoceras, fossils from Morocco, set in black Marinese stone, are priced between £5 and £9 each. They're not exactly rare, but the sea creatures embedded in them are dated around 500 million years old. Other items in the shop aren't even listed by category, but are simply grouped by colour. "Did you know," I say to the shopkeeper, "that people have started to bleach their arseholes?" "I beg your pardon?" "I don't condone it. Quite the opposite, it makes me despair. Why can't anything be natural anymore? Why do we have to keep enhancing everything? We've got by perfectly well for thousands of years with normal arseholes, so why do we now have to start improving them?" "It's not a subject I really care to discuss," the shopkeeper replies. "Oh sure, fair enough. I was just looking at all these polished stones and rocks, and they reminded me of the bleached arseholes." "Right, got it." After safely navigating my ponderous edifice out of the shop of rocks, I write a reminder to myself in bold white chalk. "I must not bleach my arsehole." The rock shop shopkeeper is now pushing buttons on her phone, looking displeased. I think about offering some cheer through the window, perhaps forming a heart shape with my 2 joined hands, but my blackboard won't hold itself. The sea is further away than I remember. It doesn't help that my heavy blackboard is taller and wider than myself and bears substantial physical weight. To give my forearm flexors and trapezius muscles a rest, I decide to carry it on my head. With the dusty chalk surface facing upwards, I walk in the middle of a narrow lane, pretending I'm a bus. This is all the more conceivable given the large rectangular shadow that I cast. As an addition, anyone looking down from above, such as passengers of airplanes with their stupid lights switched on, must now be having second thoughts about getting their arseholes bleached. Oh dear. When I look at Brighton Pier, I'm reminded of an oil drilling rig. What a sad and sorry state of affairs. It's the pier structure itself, set out on the waves, and the tall amusement ride on the end that looks like a drilling pole. But it's not their fault. If I looked like Donald Trump, I'd be pretty gutted too. In Brighton Rock, the water around Brighton Pier is described as dark poison bottle green. Unfortunately, there's a similar sense of foreboding when I view the pier today. Straight ahead is France. At one point, its landmass joined these shores, offering seamless passage to wolves and elks. Much of northern France today contains the same chalk base as England. In fact, its Côte d'Albâtre, or Alabaster Coast, boasts the same white chalk cliffs as here. Chalk still connects both countries beneath the channel, and no vote to leave is ever going to change that. There are paddle boarders out past the pier, but as I jog down to the surf, The board I'm sporting on my head is a chalkboard. I'm also dressed like a schoolteacher, although I don't quite stretch to a corduroy jacket with elbow patches. Most people prefer sandy beaches to those with pebbles and stones, but I must disagree. Sand might be easier on your bum, but it's really bloody boring. If beaches wore clothes, sand would be a white t-shirt or pastel slacks. Brighton Beach isn't blessed with glacier ice or volcanic rock, but its clunky outer stratum is fascinating nonetheless. Sitting amongst it all, I'm in my element, like an excitable kid. I feel like I'm in the geologist's equivalent of a pool of coloured balls. Near a wooden chip fork discarded amongst the rocks, I spy a silica-rich chert that resembles a piece of flint. It's quite typical of the stones that characterise many a south coast beach, and can withstand almost anything the waves will chuck at it. It's not polished or buffed, and it doesn't come with a price tag, so I add it to my pocket, as a memento of my day out at the sea. At the entrance to the pier is a clock, with 4 sides that tells 3 different times. Slightly further up is yet another rock shop. Brighton rock is made of toffee rather than rich minerals, and it comes in a tube shape, like an electric toothbrush without the brush. This shop stocks shelves of the stuff, in a vast subset of flavours, some even personalised with people's names. A couple in the doorway hold up their recent purchases, wondering aloud how the word Brighton goes all the way through. "Excuse me," I say. "I know about rocks." The couple look at each other nervously as I set about blinding them with science. First, the rock toffee is boiled and then separated into different colours. While still warm and malleable, large individual toffee letters are made before they're rolled together like a sleeping bag. This large rolled lump is then pulled and stretched into a much thinner cord of toffee, which is pulled and stretched some more before being chopped to size and left to harden. And there you have it. The couple stand unmoving, like fossilised human statues made of rock. But what's more interesting, I continue, is that actual seabed rocks off the coast of Scotland contain oil. The oil gets inside those rocks as a result of once living organisms decaying over millions of years. Certain technical processes take place as the layers of sediment accumulate. I won't bore you with the details, but basically, unlike your Brighton rock, these rocks become filled with carbon, so we shouldn't touch them with a barge pole. But try and tell that to the companies who profit from the exploitation of oil and gas. The couple begin to shift uneasily, like my period 2 class, even when there's still 10 minutes left in the lesson. Here's the thing. These offshore oil rigs drill all the way down to the sea floor. It takes around 37 minutes for oil and gas to rise 11,000 feet from the Paleocene sandstone, created 57 million years ago, up to the drill deck of an oil platform near Aberdeen. The oil and gas pass down a pipeline before the gas is separated from the oil, and the crude oil is pumped to a loading terminal and onto a sea tanker. The tanker sets sail, without sails, to a refinery in the Thames estuary. There the crude is refined into a number of products, including aviation fuel. This high-grade liquid is pumped to a depot before moving to Heathrow Airport via another pipeline. 72 tons of the fuel fill the tanks of a Virgin Boeing 747, for example. Bound for New York, travelling at 555 miles per hour, at an altitude of 31,000 feet above the Irish Sea, the fuel is burned. It probably takes less than 10 days to run its course, for oil to move from 8,000 feet below sea level to 31,000 feet above sea level. 10 days for liquid rocks to be incinerated into gas, transferring carbon from the lithosphere to the atmosphere. You know about all the carbon in the atmosphere, right? Which is leading to the climate crisis, threatening our very extinction and that of all life on this planet. Well, the greatest source of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere is from the extraction and consumption of fossil fuels. The profitability of the oil and gas companies is built on this process. The government isn't stopping them. They're taking advice from the oil and gas companies. It's batshit crazy. They won't listen to reason, to the science. They won't listen to me, and I'm an expert in these matters. Maybe they'll listen to you. Anyway, hope that helps answer your question about rocks. The couple wander off in a daze. One of them is shaking his head, and the other one is holding his hand to the side of his head in the shape of a gun before he shoots himself. The woman behind the counter of the Candy Rock shop coughs in a false way. Are you trying to bore my customers to death? Not intentionally, I reply. Just trying to impart some valuable knowledge. Well, yes, I agree it is valuable, but I think your delivery needs work. Less of a lecture would help. I think I'm on board with you there. Are you familiar with Brighton Rock by Graham Greene? Yes, in fact, I was just talking about it. To myself. Good. Well, the guys who shove the stick of Candy Rock down Fred Hale's throat. Yes. They're you. Wow. It might be one way to deliver a message, but there are other more palatable ways too. Like storytelling. Like music. I know your message is important, just try and make it easier to swallow. The robot fortune teller is doing a good trade. His glass box is well positioned at the doors to the amusement arcade, and its flashing lights attract much passing traffic. He speaks in a caricature genie voice, and part of his spiel involves asking for more money for more wisdom. I've been trying to warn about the future for years for free, yet people would rather pour £1 coins into a box and get served up cliched premonitions from a clunky old robot. Yes, it's for entertainment purposes only. And people obviously want to hear about opportunities and self-improvement rather than cataclysmic climate breakdown. Still, as the chalk message on my blackboard now reads, no great future awaits you on a dead planet. Leaving my board to lean on the arcade, I wander further up the pier. Most people look happy, glad of some respite from the harsh day-to-day. I don't want to be a misery guts, a misfortune teller. I'd much rather be entertained myself and leave the serious, regret to inform you messages to someone else. At the end of the pier, next to the Crazy Mouse ride, is the booster, or drilling pole. In reality, it's a gigantic swinging contraption with people strapped to either end, screaming. Ah! A calmer, more idyllic scene unfolds up the coast, where the white chalk cliffs of Saltdean, once chunks of lime mud on the sea floor, catch the late sunlight. On the other side of the pier, the sun itself begins to set behind a backdrop of slowly spinning wind turbines further out at sea. A large formation of starlings fly amidst the soft, picturesque light, united in their collective need for food or fellowship. The Candy Rock couple from earlier, along with many others, have turned away from the amusements to enjoy this heartwarming scene instead. Despite my aching arms and my worries about school and the planet, it briefly makes the difficulties of life seem worth the effort. There are two bouncers outside Chalk, the venue. They look like me when I stand at the school gates, but they're clearly bigger and more intimidating. Also, I'm not late, and they aren't giving out detentions. What's with the blackboard? Asks one. It's for the bar area, I reply. You'll need to go through that door, replies the other. This one's for ticket holders. My mistake, I say. The other door is ringed off with railings. People stand behind these, smoking. A different security person moves a section of railing back and opens the door for my blackboard and I. Inside is a darkened passage leading upwards. At the top is another door, which opens out into the venue itself. Straight ahead is the stage. Woohoo. My blackboard blends in well with the surroundings, which, despite being part of Chalk, are black. Black walls, black curtains, and a black sparkly floor dominates the intimate venue space. Silver ventilation shafts overhead resemble the sandworms out of Dune. Up on stage, technicians set up instruments and move microphone stands. Leaning my blackboard against a black back wall I head to the bar for a plastic pint. If outside is like the school gates, inside is like the classroom. Already the keener students are gathered near the front, awaiting the lesson, whilst others hang back on the periphery drinking beer. Whatever lesson Squid has come to impart, they already have a captive audience, ready to learn. I'm jealous. If only my students were so receptive. Tonight, my blackboard is at the back of the classroom, and my class are facing the opposite way. The only audience I can hope to reach, therefore, is the one on stage. I'm interested to know more about Squid and their music, so I ask a man nearby. Well, he says, they tend to get classified as post-punk, but you could say they're also experimental rock, or post-rock. They're like a guitar band, but with an electronic section, and also a brass element. Interesting. They sound very similar to my field, which is rocks. Rocks? Yes, from the ground. They come in all kinds of subgenres too, although I suppose most of them would fit within the post-rock sphere. You also have your hard rocks and your soft rocks. Your soft rocks being sedimentary rocks like sandstone, limestone, and chalk. Ironically, chalk, this venue, is built on top of chalk, which slowly accumulated in layers over millions and millions of years. Whereas your hard rocks, with subgenres such as granite and slate, are formed more suddenly by... The man raises his hand. Sorry, can I stop you there? You're making my brain explode, Mr. Darwin, sir. Damn, I've done it again. I keep forgetting that the earth upon which people live isn't really their thing. I'm spared any further awkwardness as the band arrive on stage to cheers and whistles. It's a reception I can only dream of. The drummer begins like the giant chalk man of Cern Abyss, beating his club, shaking the earth. Interestingly, he's also the lead vocalist, so it's like the giant is speaking to us, or shouting at us, as the case may be. What's your favourite Squid song? I shout to the man alongside. I don't know, maybe Terrestrial Changeover Blues? He shouts back. Terrestrial Changeover Blues, I repeat, shouting. Interesting! Interesting title! Producing my chalk in chalk, I write at the very top of my blackboard, 1. Play Terrestrial Changeover Blues. 2. We need to stick to 1.5 degrees or all terrestrial life will end. The band continues to receive much applause and acclaim from the class. Unlike my geography lesson, they also must cope with the glare of the stage lights. So it's unclear whether the notes on the board will be seen. Security folk occupy a narrow passage between the crowd and the stage itself, like knights protecting the storming of the castle. But perhaps I can still have an audience with the king. As it happens, I've brought my own drawbridge. I'm going to the castle to deliver an urgent message to the king, I inform the nearby man. I need to warn him about the disaster forthcoming. What? He shouts. King Squid! I call back. No time to explain, I must make haste. As I shuffle forwards, the top of my blackboard rises above the crowd like the dorsal fin of a basking shark. When I reach the front, I lower my bridge across the security moat to the castle and commence my crossing. But the gallant battalion beneath mount a counter-defence, raising my drawbridge again with their arms. So I slide back down the back of the board. I am quickly seized and marched around the side of the crowd and back down the same passageway from which I arrived. Hey, I say. Don't shoot the messenger. Outside, I'm steered beyond the railings and issued with a stern warning never to return. My first day at a new school, and already I've been expelled. Although saddened to have lost my blackboard, at least I can now move around more freely. I stop in at a nearby pub, which has its own blackboard outside. But it's less of a bridge and more of an obstacle, like something a Crufts dog might jump over. Inside, the bartender asks if I want my whiskey on the rocks. What sort of rocks? I ask. The ice reminds me of Greenland's ice cap, which I attempt to stop melting by drinking up all of the drink. A man enters the bar and calls out to the bartender. "Hey, I think somebody's messing with you." "What do you mean?" asks the bartender. "Your blackboard out there. On one side it reads 'Boring Bastards Inside', and the other side, 'Lose the Will to Live' inside." The bartender looks over at me as I attempt to wipe the chalk dust off my face, possibly adding more. The famous German artist, Joseph Beuys, used to formulate his ideas on blackboards, I tell the bartender. And now those blackboards are framed and part of art collections in the world's most prestigious museums. They're worth hundreds of thousands, if not millions, even though they started out as normal school blackboards. So, you should be grateful that I've chosen your blackboard to formulate my own ideas on. No, I'm fucking not. I'm going to wipe that shit straight off, and you're going to get the hell out of my pub. I really don't care for that kind of language. I wander around the lanes in a daze. By chance, I find myself back outside Chalk. The gig must have finished because they're stacking up all the railings. A few small groups still mill around outside. A young man walks towards me looking buzzed. "Did you go to the gig?" I ask him. "Yeah, fucking great," he replies. "Whoa, no need to swear. With the F word." I've only just sat down on a concrete step next to a parked up bus when I spy my blackboard. A member of staff has carted it outside and now they're leaning it on the side of Chalk. The exterior of Chalk is white and my blackboard looks proportionately like a stick of black chalk. I expect a reprimand, to be sternly summoned back, but as I once again take the weight and run with it, I'm not. A bus helps us up the coast a touch, towards those white chalk cliffs. Next to our bus stop is a brightly lit petrol station, a representation of the past, a former civilization of sorts, but one which, incredibly, is still a going concern. I walk across tanks hidden beneath the ground where petroleum is stored, recently refined from oil, from the arteries of rocks, 11,000 feet below sea level. A van noisily departs the forecourt, expelling the burnt, oily rock fumes into the seaside air. The petrol station is branded with the logo of a well-known oil and gas company. I ask the young attendant inside how he can work for such a life-depleting brand. "I don't," he replies bluntly. His employer is a separate company which simply operates the forecourts. "They're owned by a US private equity company," he explains. "Most of the investment in oil and gas these days is through small companies backed by private equity." "Well, I'm glad you told me," I say. "I was actually planning to throw this rock from Brighton Beach through your window." "That would have been bloody stupid," he says, "because you just bought that beer here with your debit card." "Why is everyone in Brighton so sweary?" I ask. "And why do petrol stations sell beer? Surely that's a recipe for disaster. A smaller scale of disaster, granted, from the other one you're pushing by selling that other shit." "Now you're swearing," he says. "Brighton must be rubbing off on you." "Maybe, but I'm allowed to, because I'm a grown-up, and I'm angry about the seabed rocks being drilled and all the carbon being released, creating havoc, like when the ghosts are let out of the ecto-containment units in Ghostbusters." "Fair enough. I feel like I need to throw this rock at something. I've just been to a gig with a loud live band. I need to let off some pent-up energy." "Sure, excuse me." The young man has to serve a customer, so I politely stand to one side. When the transaction is finished, he continues. "So you're talking about throwing rocks?" "Yes. Actually, while you're serving that customer, I was thinking maybe I could throw my rock at some government institution instead. Where's the office of your local MP? Nice idea, but unfortunately Brighton Pavilion's elected Member of Parliament represents the Green Party. And I believe they're actually trying to do something about the climate emergency. You have got to be joking. Did you know that Joseph Beuys co-founded the Green Party in Germany? I did not know that. To be honest, I don't know who Joseph Beuys is. Look him up. He had some really interesting ideas, which he would formulate in chalk, on blackboards. Okay, well, good luck. Thanks. Thanks for your time. After walking through the automatic doors of the refined petroleum station, I turn and hoist my Brighton rock through their massive plate glass window. Blam. Unlike the stark, artificial glare of the forecourt, the beach opposite is partially lit by a three-quarter moon. My arms, already done in by carrying the blackboard around all day, now ache more from the throwing action. But I muster them again to help plunge my board deep into the shingle sand composite of beach, commonly found in England's southeast. The blackboard stands upright, catching swathes of moonlight. If it can hold firm through the night, perhaps it will catch swathes of sunlight too. 3 police officers arrive soon after. As they lead me away, I revert to my usual spiel concerning the exploitation of rocks for fossil fuels and how the unearthed carbons are leading to climate tragedy. But one of the officers just retorts, Yeah, mate, we've heard it all before.